Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. As you all follow the news around the world, the economic situation, the world, is moving very fast. We don't know in what direction because, trade is a little bit worrisome now that the financial crisis is still lingering on. Fortunately, in the region, things are doing quite well, but again, one cannot underestimate the linkage in this global interdependent world. And today, I have the pleasure to have with me a good friend, Knuckey, who is the Chief Executive CEO of ANZ Royal Bank. We hope to have a good dialogue on the prospect of the region, and hopefully we can learn some lesson a bit and how it would affect the Cambodian economy. How can the private sector sort of like follow a bit the trend and get themselves ready a bit in this context. So I hope that we could have a good discussion and you can learn something out of this exchange. So, Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. I fear you might be getting to the bottom of your guest list, but I'm very, very proud, very humbled to be here, actually.
Yes.
So thank you.
Grant, before we start the exchange, perhaps you could share with the audience a bit your background,
Sure. So I'm a relative newcomer to Cambodia. I've been here all of 4 months.
You have 2 more months, then the honeymoon's over.
That's right. No, I can feel that. Previously, I was based in Shanghai,
okay.
Where I was for about 2.5 years.
Okay.
And I've done a sort of slow tour of Asia over the last decade, or just over a decade, and based in Hong Kong before China, and Singapore before that, and really worked right across the region over that time. So I've been very fortunate, actually, professionally. And
so you're an Asia Pacific man.
Yes, I think that's probably an accurate description. I love the region.
Yes.
I love working here. It's very motivating.
Yes.
And changes all the time.
Grant, a bit about ANZ Royal Bank.
Sure. So ANZ Royal, I think as some will know, was really a bit of an innovator.
Yes.
In the Cambodian banking sector. So when we began our operations in 2005, the banking sector here looked quite different to what it does today. And ANZ really brought, I think, a number of innovations and firsts into the market. Things like ATMs.
Yeah, okay, great. Is that right? So you brought ATM concept
into the market, yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And now they're proliferating right across the country,
yes.
Which is great.
Yes. See, innovator, but other imitator. Yeah.
Yes, no, but we see that as a compliment.
Yes,
so,
yes. So how well established, how settled are you in Cambodia? You're all over the country, I hope.
We are. So most of our presence is here in Phnom Penh, but we're also in Battambang, we're in Siem Reap, we're in Kampong Cham, Sonickville. So we're quite well spread.
All right. Well, I mean, ANZ is really an Asia Pacific bank per se,
yes.
Because you're all over the region. I think being a regional bank, give you that regional perspective, how you see the Cambodian economic situation, the banking sector here, but there's direct link with
yes.
other in the region. From that perspective, as a regional bank, how do you look at the regional context? How do you look at the regional perspective, the trend, as it affects Cambodia?
Yes, certainly. So right now, I think the biggest change from a regional perspective in the last few years has been the increasing influence of China
yes.
in the region, and I mean that from in terms of sensitivity to growth.
Yes.
So prior to, and in fact this is empirically true,
yes.
prior to about 2007, most of the growth sensitivity in this region was to the US
okay.
and Europe.
Yes.
That has switched.
Yes.
So China is, statistically, empirically, a much bigger driver
okay.
of this region than it previously was.
Are you saying that basically the region depend quite a bit on the growth, the economic strength of China.
Relatively, that has shifted. So
Yes.
it's much more prominent a driver.
Yes.
The US and Europe are still very important.
Yes, yes.
For Southeast Asia, for Cambodia.
Yes.
Very important. But the relative weight has definitely shifted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I was in New York for a few days, but I can say America is still America. America is still powerful, you know.
Yes.
Europe is still powerful, irrespective the ups and downs of the financial sector side. But you see a shift toward more China being the driving force in the region.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, you know, a bit of a tectonic shift
Yes,
globally,
yes.
really. That's very evident. But as you say, those, you know, the US economy, the European Union,
Yes.
are still very strong in terms of their influence on the global economy, in terms of their scale.
Yes,
They're
yeah.
still, you know, the most prominent economic
Yes,
zones. But China's weight and influence and the sensitivity of other countries
Yes.
to its growth is definitely increasing.
Yeah. Do you see a shift of the trading pattern, for example, you know, ASEAN country trading, investing, doing business more with China, you know, now?
Absolutely. So trade patterns are changing. So first they're changing intra-Asia. So
Yes.
there's a lot more intra-Asia trade
Yeah.
that's driving the region, and the weight of that is increasing, you know, over the weight of, say, the US and Europe.
Yes.
And then China, in particular, its influence as a trading nation is increasing. With Cambodia, it's still relatively small, that trade relationship, particularly on the export
Yes,
side.
yes.
But it's growing. It's
Yes.
growing fast.
You're based in China, you're based in Hong Kong, both China. So when you say China, are you referring both China plus Hong Kong?
Yes, I mean, I guess we always talk about Greater China in its fullest context.
Yes,
so,
yes.
So yes. Yeah.
So, well, you know, ASEAN have the ASEAN free trade with China. It's the same as with Australia, New Zealand,
Yes.
and my understanding now that Hong Kong want to also have its separate status as a free trade with ASEAN. So I can see this trade dynamics is really, you know, pushing and pulling the regional economy to move forward. Are you confident that this trend will continue?
I am, and I think Cambodia is relatively well placed actually, because Cambodia is already a very open economy.
Yes.
So there are very few trade restrictions.
Yes.
And there's, you know, it's a very you know, open borders to trade, which means that the transition
Yeah.
for Cambodia to, say, an ASEAN free trade zone in 2015
Yes.
is actually relatively mild.
Yes.
Whereas some perhaps other countries in the region,
Yes.
they'll have to transition a bit from a policy point of view, but it also means companies have
Yes.
to make changes
Yes.
in their expectations and behaviours, and perhaps some have been subsidised.
Yes.
In Cambodia, companies don't have to make that transition,
Yes.
so I think that's actually a very positive factor.
You know, when the ASEAN Secretary did a scorecard, you know, on the economic readiness of the 10 ASEAN countries, how prepared are they for 2015 for the ASEAN Economic Community? Cambodia ranked third after Singapore and Malaysia, and that's probably reflect the element that you just said, that the economy is quite wide open, but it's a leftover from the WTO, you know, trade liberalization
Yes,
commitment, right?
yeah.
And this is something that I am very optimistic moving forward, in the sense that we're not going backward because of this commitment, right? And this gives us a chance, you know, in the future
Absolutely.
to be part, or at least Cambodia should be a gateway to the sub-region.
I think that's right. I think the key for Cambodia to take advantage of that, because it's already prepared in that sense, is to have the plan
Yes.
and the industrial policy
Yes.
to take full advantage of
Yes.
that. Perhaps over a period in the next few years when maybe some other countries here will be a little more introspective,
Yes.
focusing on changing policy to meet that free trade
Yes,
zone.
yes.
And Cambodia can really focus on its plan,
Yes.
its economic plan to take advantage.
You mentioned plan, Grant. From a banking perspective, how do you see, because plan, we speak about country competitiveness. It's not the country that really compete, it's the company
Yes.
who actually compete. It's the industry in itself that are competing with another industry. It's a cluster dimension. How do you see the role of a banking sector to support that? And where do you see ANZ, for that matter, as a regional bank? How do you see that?
Yeah, I think that the banking sector is absolutely fundamental to supporting companies and therefore the country in its growth. And I think the best example of the importance of the banking sector was probably seen in the financial crisis globally, where the freezing of the banking sector had a major impact on global economic growth.
Yes.
So a healthy banking sector that supports, through financing, and
Yes.
through risk management, and through financial inclusion, indeed,
Yes.
is critical. Actually, it's a piece of your basic economic infrastructure, foundation, and it really needs to be functioning well.
Financial inclusion, it's a very, it's a word that not many people understand that, right? We were at the G20 summit, and this year, because Cambodia is the chair of ASEAN, our Prime Minister was, given the honor to be invited to G20. And the Mexican presidency have in their agenda financial inclusion. How do you get the most of the population to have access to finance? Where do we rank in Cambodia? Where do we fit in terms of financial inclusion? Not just for the big company who can access your banks, but generally for the entrepreneurial sector. Where do they fare in this financial inclusion?
Yeah, so when it comes to banking sector penetration,
yes.
It's still relatively low, but growing quickly in Cambodia, and I know that my regulator, the National Bank of Cambodia, takes that mandate very seriously and put a lot of time into that mandate. At the level of an entrepreneur, I think the access to finance in Cambodia is actually quite good, and a lot of that's been driven through the microfinance sector, who I think do a great job. So I think the access to finance is quite sound and improving at the level of small companies.
Yes.
And I think we'll continue to see that trend continue, and I think the banking sector will also continue to support that.
We just had this year the launch of the credit bureau.
Yes.
You think this is very helpful for the financial inclusion, reaching out to the next layer?
Extremely helpful. So ANZ Royal are a big supporter of that bureau. For us, things like a credit bureau are part of the framework really of the financial infrastructure of a country.
Yes.
And if you have a functioning bureau, it really helps in the end promote financial inclusion and really the risk management of the financial system, which is incredibly important. So and that bureau, I can definitely say from my own personal experience, is already functioning very, very effectively.
Yes, that's great. That's very good news. Looking more forward to the next several years, where Cambodia will be part of the ASEAN Economic Community. Of course, ASEAN is 10 countries. Some well established like Singapore on one extreme, and the other extreme you have like Laos, who are small, but you have Myanmar also, which is emerging and which is now a bit sort of like the limelight, the spotlight of everybody in the region. But generally, how do you see the region and the dynamics between these various level of economic level development, and how from the banking perspective, how do you see this interaction? Yeah.
I think the positive thing that we're seeing, and this has a spin-off for Cambodia, is the fact that we see more and more multinational companies, large companies, focused on the Mekong region as a region in its own right, and for them to invest and grow. And for some of them, it would be true that Myanmar has maybe been the spark. But what we see happening is that they look increasingly right around the region and making investment decisions. And many of them are seeing Cambodia as a very sound, good opportunity to invest in. And we are seeing quite an acceleration, actually, in the interest of multinationals in Cambodia. And part of that is the attraction of ASEAN.
Yes. This year we chair ASEAN, and what you just said is quite interesting because, ASEAN become now the magnet that attract. And early this year, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton brought a big trade investment delegation, multinational, coming to the region, right? It happened to be in Cambodia, in Siem Reap, but still, their attraction is toward ASEAN. And I think it is in this context that I see this re-engagement of America into the region, not just in the form of geopolitical thing, but when you reshift your attention, you always have the business coming along because the confidence level, the political attention to the region, right? So do you see in the context of a rising, growing China, having more U.S. multinational, European multinational coming to the region, you think this is a good competition?
Very much so. Absolutely. I think some of those decisions will be made on the basis of openness and the support to that FDI. Some of them will be made on relative cost.
Yes.
So they'll be made for different reasons in different countries. But I think fundamentally that's a positive for the region.
Yes.
The extent to which Cambodia can directly benefit, I think, will be a function of not just its current openness and its cost advantage, but also its long-term plan.
Yes, yes.
Because multinationals, they want to see that long-term, vision and plan in an economy that will support them.
Yes.
So the key infrastructure, human resource infrastructure, the financial infrastructure, and the banking sector, those things are important. And then the physical infrastructure, roads, and rail, and ports, and electricity.
Yeah.
Those are the things they'll look for.
Grant, back to Cambodia. I think you, as CEO of ANZ, you have you succeed your predecessor, and you're sort of like continuing the good work of helping not just in the banking sector itself, but the bank has contributed quite a bit in the policy making of this country in the form of helping CDI, which is one of the oldest economic research independent institution, every year to have this annual Outlook conference. And I'm glad that ANZ is continuing that. I think from your perspective, what motivates you to support this conference? How do you see that contribution to the development of the country?
Absolutely. In the end, there is mutual benefit.
Yes.
And there's reciprocity there because and we're very proud to be involved with that conference. Because to the extent that we can influence and advance ideas and discourse around economic policy and change, in the end, ANZ will be a beneficiary of that through the growth of the economy and the way in which the economy can accelerate, can make itself more attractive to business and investment. These are things that ultimately benefit the banking sector. So there's always I think a mutual benefit there, and so being part of that discourse is, I think, for us, part of our mandate here, really.
Gwen, I was very pleased as chairman of CDI in that wearing that hat in that capacity, that the work of the conference, the idea that coming out from this discourse, we're able to put into policy brief, feed into the government, top level, to the point that we're sending this to the Prime Minister, and many other ministers see the benefit of this very refined, condensed, but very sort of like a realistic recommendation, like early in the year when we had on ASEAN integration, for example. The outcome of the discourse was a series of harsh, review on what are the challenges that would take place, in the next several years, and what sort of policy recommendation the government should take to get itself ready, right? Projecting to the future next year, we're going to have another similar event, but be focusing more on the thing that torment everybody now because of the rising price of the fuel, energy costs, but also its impact on the livelihood of the people, and how can we get a discourse from people from different sides, and that will contribute from their regional dimension, how all these things happen. What's your prospect in that?
Well, it's a complex subject, and if Cambodia currently has a competitive disadvantage, it is around its energy costs.
Yes.
And that's something that is fundamental, and in terms of competitiveness.
Yeah.
But it's also something that I think we can very clearly see the government and policy have a strong view on, and are moving quite rapidly in the direction of a fix, a long-term fix, which involves quite a massive expansion of the capacity, electricity capacity within Cambodia. So I think from that point of view, things seem to be moving in the right direction. Really, the key questions to be answered, I think, would be, where will that investment come from? What will be the nature of that investment? There are also obvious questions, consequential questions about sustainability, environment, all the things that go hand in hand with an energy strategy. For sure.
Energy is a big title, it's a big name, it's a big theme, and we're moving quite a bit toward more environmental friendly thing, and this is probably something that I think this country need is more a fresh look on how do we tackle this what you call this competitive disadvantage, in the sense that our cost of electricity is very high, and it's a big discouragement, it's a big dilution of other cost advantage that we have in terms of labor, this sort of thing. But nothing prevents us to be a little bit futuristic, catching up the trend a bit with all the thing that concern the world now, which is environment, right?
Yes.
And so from the banking sector, are they looking along the same line in terms of environmental conscious, less carbon footprint?
Very much so. So on a number of levels.
Yes.
First of all, ANZ as a bank has a very strong environmental policy and track record. In fact, we just were voted. There's a Dow Jones Sustainability Index. ANZ is the #1 ranked bank in the world on that index. So it's something we take seriously as a core element of our strategy.
Yes.
Is our sustainability and our carbon footprint.
Yes.
Here in Cambodia, in fact, we undertook a very rigorous review of the carbon footprint of ANZ Royal.
Wow.
And we've put into place a number of measures and changes within our office environment, that will reduce our carbon footprint, but will also save us quite a substantial amount of money over a period of years. So you know, really everyone's benefiting there. So yeah, really ANZ places, you know, environment and sustainability really at the heart of its strategy. We also take that into account in every interaction with customers. So when we lend, it is actually part of our credit policy to look at
so
the environmental
it's filtered down to even at the consumer lending level.
Absolutely. So environmental impact is part of our lending criteria. So we look at, you know, perhaps how the company we're lending to impacts on the environment. We make an assessment of whether that's, you know, at an acceptable level and whether we can perhaps influence it.
Interesting. Graham, we're running out of time. So what's your last word that you want the audience to remember from this course?
I think for me, one of the most important things to me, you know, for me personally, is the need to have a plan and have focus and discipline. And I think for me that's also one of the most important things for Cambodia going forward. And in fact it's one of the reasons I'm very confident, because I see through some of the Vision 2030 planning that's going on and the industrial policy around that, you know, I see a very clear planning and a trend towards more detailed planning around the future of the Cambodian economy. So really my message from the perspective of ANZ Royal would be, yeah, let's follow that through, let's keep that up. It's so important for the future of the country.
Well, Grant, thank you so much for coming and
thank you.
Share with us your perspective on not just on Cambodia but on the region itself, and having the faith that this country will carry through, you know, its long-term vision. In this case, you mentioned Vision 2030, which is something that Cambodia aspire, so that few years down the road we will not be anymore considered as a least developed country, but we aspire to be a low middle income country, and hopefully by then, you know, Cambodia will be flipping the page, you know, moving away from that image of a post-crisis country, you know, toward a country, a normal country that can contribute. And it is in that context that I thought maybe I just add a bit that, you know, Cambodia is doing a lot of things out there in the international context just to assert itself, its own footprint into the global community and nation. Like, for example, we are aspiring to be a member of the Security Council, non-permanent seat for 2013-14. We are sending a peacekeeper around the you know, conflict area to help on demining. So many different things that one would not expect from 20 years ago. A country born out of the ashes from the multilateral institution. People are coming to help. And it's such a good feeling that now Cambodia is in position to give something back. Right? Yeah. And ASEAN Economic Community in 2015, in a few years' time, is also another opportunity that Cambodia can assert itself as an active player in this larger, you know, community or nation there. So on that note, Grant, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I think we have a very rich, although quite broad, from global down to regional, down to the, you know, country level, and even further down to the micro level on how, you know, the micro lending itself to the entrepreneur is have a direct sort of like correlation with what's happening in the world in context of environment sustainability, and how do we get our entrepreneur to invest, but from a perspective of you know, sustainability. And this is quite a richer discourse, and I hope that the audience will find it quite useful. And from that, I really look forward to see the progress of Cambodia along that way. And of course, with good partner with like ANZ Bank, we're on the right track. So good night, and I'll see you next week.